You may know someone or have a family member who is on the autism spectrum, and if so, it's very common. In fact, there's more than 5 million children and adults in the US now who have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And you may already know then that in April, the Autism Society typically celebrates Autism Awareness Month. This year they have shifted to Autism Accpetance Month. I'm here with Sergeant Stefan Bjes from the Addison Police Department, here to tell us about some of the training that officers go through to de-escalate situations with people on the spectrum, and programs that are available if you know someone who needs services. But first, Stefan, tell me a little bit about your story, because this is a very personal one for you.
Yes, so in 2013, my 2 youngest sons were diagnosed with autism. And when my wife and I received this life-altering diagnosis, we tried to learn as much as we could about autism so that we could be the best advocates for our sons. Mm-hmm. And as we learned more, I started to realize what would happen if my 2 worlds collided, meaning my personal life as a dad and then my professional life as a police officer here for the village of Addison. And I began to wonder, do we as law enforcement really understand the characteristics and behaviors associated with autism? Mm-hmm. And truthfully, the answer was really no. And it's really what started my mission here within the Addison Police Department, to be able to bring some of the information that I have learned to my own personal life and incorporate it into what we do serving the community.
This has got to be a huge challenge, because I have a family member who's on the spectrum as well, and I know that it's very different depending on, who you're talking about. Some people with autism literally don't speak. Others, you may not know in interacting with them until something, kind of sets them off. So how are you able to identify someone?
Well, and really what I tell the officers when we do the training is we're looking for the characteristics. Mm-hmm. Some certain things like characteristics like stimming. Stimming is a self-regulating behavior, but it's a very common behavior even with just about everybody on the autism spectrum. So we tell the officers to look for certain red flags: lack of eye contact, inability with social interaction, lack of communication, all things that can be seen as identifiers for someone who might be on the autism spectrum, and use those cues to make a determination of how we're going to interact with that individual. And you're right, it's a spectrum for a reason. You can fall anywhere in the spectrum. And there's a little saying that says, if you know one person with autism, well, guess what? You probably only know one person with autism, because everybody's going to be a little bit different.
That's a very good point.
So we kind of give them a general overall view of characteristics and some of the behaviors associated with autism, and how to safely interact during those interactions, and different resources and tools and strategies to utilize to be able to de-escalate a situation or have a positive interaction with that community member.
So tell us a little bit about the training. Were you the one who brought this idea then to the department?
I did, and I went to Director Hayden and said, obviously there's a personal aspect to this, so I'd like to be able to train our officers, because there really is, at this point, there really is a lack of training associated with autism in our interactions. And Director Hayden was super supportive, and I put a class together and I started training our officers back in 2015. And mm-hmm. now it's part of our every year curriculum within the agency. So all of our officers have been trained in how to interact with children and adults with autism, as well as the characteristics and then strategies for safe interactions. But every one of our new officers that comes in the department is mandated to sit through a 2-hour training block on autism. So every officer in the department has now received several hours of autism training going forth and helping us during those interactions with the community.
Is this something common? Has it come into use on a fairly regular basis, or is this kind of a just in case?
No, we've used it on multiple occasions, and
really?
The numbers are staggering. We're talking about in 2020, the CDC said 1 in 54 births will have an autism diagnosis. That's up 178% from 2000 for the year 2000.
Yeah.
So we're climbing at staggering rates, and it's not a matter of if we have contact with somebody with autism, but when. And
I see.
So we've had numerous contacts and numerous calls for service involving children and adults on the spectrum. And we're able to incorporate some of the programming and training that we've had to safely work through those calls for service.
So how do you, tell me some of the tools that you're using to train the officers then. How do you go about doing that?
So we talk about the characteristics of autism, and mm-hmm. we know that there's 3 main areas that are affected by autism, and that's social interaction, communication, and then restrictive and repetitive mannerisms. So what we tell officers to look for these things in the totality. Are they able to communicate? Other characteristics to look for are deficits in tone of voice. And sometimes children and adults with autism have almost a sing-song or computer-like voice. So being able to recognize that. Being able to recognize some of those self-stimulating behaviors. But we're also teaching the community is please disclose that you have this disability. Information is key in this, and if we understand what we're interacting with and the community understands how we're going to handle things, we bridge this gap that has always been there between our special needs community and law enforcement.
And I'm sure it's sometimes a challenge if someone is calling law enforcement, they may not realize that they're dealing with someone on the spectrum. They may think, oh, this person's just behaving erratically, perhaps they're on drugs or something like that. How are you, is it just simply those three characteristics that you're looking for? I mean, how do you differentiate whether this is a dangerous situation or someone that you can kind of de-escalate with the proper tools?
Well, it really starts with our initial 911 call, and now at this point we're putting together some training for our dispatchers as well. And I've provided a sheet for them to kind of recognize some of the characteristics when receiving a 911 call, an emergency call. If it is someone with autism spectrum disorder that's calling, trying to recognize some of those characteristics in the voice and what they're asking. So it really starts in an initial 911 call, and then it funnels out to us. But we want to look for, and biggest thing is we want to be able to identify and recognize our special needs residents here in Addison. So we have a program called Premise Alert, which allows us to pre-register those individuals within the police department. So when we do get a 911 call or emergency call, it is flagged in our CAD or computer automated dispatch system that there is a premise alert and that person has a disability. And that information gets relayed to the officers prior to our arrival. So
that's got to be huge.
It's huge because information is critical in this. And if we know have that information going into the call for service, we know how we can handle it. And clearly we can adjust as we go as the call dictates, but we can still, having that information, knows now what we're dealing with and what resources and tools that we can incorporate during that interaction.
How do, for instance, parents go about registering that kind of information?
So you can actually go to the Addison Police Department's website. We have a crisis intervention team page now that was set up. Our premise alert forms are on there, as well as additional resources for families. One of the things we offered families was a 911 script, and we know that in a moment of chaos, you're probably not going to remember all the facts or information that we would need. So we took the work out of it, and I created a 911 script with the information that we would need, and really you just fill in the blanks as a family member. So when you call in a crisis situation, you're able to just really read off of the script, and then we get the information that we need, and that can be relayed to the officers. Another resource we did was we created a neighborhood letter, and some families are apprehensive about it, but some are not, and it's really letting your neighbors know that you have a son or a daughter or a loved one with a disability, and advising them that if they're seen out unaccompanied or there's some strange behaviors, to call the loved one and then call 911 next. Some families are apprehensive about it, but some are not. And really, in my personal experience, my neighbors know that my sons have a disability, and if they're out unattended, they're calling me and they're calling the police department next.
Right.
Because it's not a normal situation. So there's some of the things, and then we've created like a safety plan for families and resources that we can use, whether it's we offer our families window clings, so letting us know ahead of time when we arrive at a house, there's a window cling that they have a loved one with a disability. We also have them available for vehicles, so we have them on a traffic stop or a traffic crash. We have that information visible on the car, and we can now know that the individual in his car may not be responsive due to their disability.
Smart 911 has the same kind of tool, don't they?
Yes, and Smart 911 is very similar to our premise alert, but now Smart 911, as we know, is county-wide, and that's what's critical. So it may not always happen here in the village of Addison. It may happen in Itasca, Bloomingdale, one of the other communities. So that's where Smart 911 plays a critical role as well, in addition to, and we encourage families to do both, register within the police department's premise alert program, and then as well as Smart 911.
Do you work with the school districts as well to identify, especially children on the spectrum?
We do, and I spent 3 years as the school resource officer at Addison School District 4, so I have a great relationship with the school district. And every year, Addison School District 4 has a special needs resource fair, so they have different resources from the area come in, and every year we have a booth and a table, and we're able to register our children with special needs and our programs and offer the resources that we have. But we also do some parent training. We want to be able to have parents create a safety plan for their kids at home as well out in public. But also, we want parents to understand how we are going to respond in certain situations and not to be alarmed. And tell parents it's safe to disclose that your son or daughter or your loved one has a disability. And we're trained and we want to build that relationship with our special needs community. We know there's some apprehensiveness by families to contact law enforcement because there's a fear of their actions or behaviors might be misinterpreted, and there's a lot of incidents that have gone very negatively with law enforcement and the special needs community. And as a police department in a village, we're trying to combat that, and we're trying to build this relationship and build a positive relationship with our special needs community.
Tell me about some of the tools. I know you brought a bag. Some of the tools that you can use if you get a call to kind of de-escalate that situation.
So we've incorporated some very simple things to incorporate in our everyday care equipment within the department. And one of the first things that we did is we created, they're called PEX cards. They're picture exchange card system. And basically they're just visuals for individuals that have, a lack of verbal ability. All we really did was take a page out of what school districts have been doing for many years, incorporated them into our, into our police department.
Well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
I agree. It's a tremendous idea, and I'm like, why didn't I think of this sooner? And it was just, with the assistance of Addison School District 4, we created a set of cards that were geared towards our interactions with law enforcement. Are you hurt? I'm a police officer. Stay right here. Do you take medication? This is a fireman. Things that we would have in an emergency call for situation. So we have several sets of those cards incorporated into our squad cars, and we utilize them in numerous calls for service to help with that nonverbal communication that we needed to. One of the other things we decided to do is, we know a lot of aggressive or self-stimulating behavior, especially with children and adults with autism, is a result of sensory overload. So what we wanted to do is be able to create a way to reduce that sensory overload. So what we did is we created their sensory kits. So our sensory kits that we've created, we have some items that, and I kind of took a page out of my own book as dad to create. So we've got some noise canceling headphones, different types of fidgets, the things that help kind of with de-escalation. We also have a whiteboard for communication. So a lot of times children and adults have easier to be able to write out something, or a whiteboard, at least in my case with my sons, is a calming strategy. So we incorporated all these things in these kits, and we also have a weighted lap pad. We know that deep pressure is a great calming strategy for children and adults with autism, so we have a weighted lap pad in the bag as well, to kind of help provide that deep pressure to help with de-escalation. And we had the kits out only a few months the first time we utilized them. And it was with a young man who had autism and was pretty agitated. Our patrol officers broke out the kits, and we immediately built rapport. The kid was able to use some of the items to kind of de-escalate himself, but he grew this attachment to the kit, so we ended up having to give him the whole kit. But it was at that point it was worth it, and we ended up giving the whole kit. We just replaced the items that were in it. And we tell the officers, if there's an attachment to one of the items, let them keep it while we replace it.
Nice.
So it was just one strategy that we used to help de-escalate some of these situations. And these are just simple things that we were able to incorporate, and I took from my personal life as dad and to be able to incorporate here within the police department.
And you do training in other communities with this now, don't you?
I do, and I've been very lucky that departments are starting to realize that this is a critical piece of information that officers need on a regular basis. So I've been very lucky for the past few years to be able to train law enforcement agencies and officers all over the country. And we're doing some local ones. I'm working with the Elgin Police Department to train their 200 plus officers right now. And I've trained officers down in Tennessee, Seattle, Washington, Florida, and I've been able to travel out. And then obviously a lot of the local departments I've been able to train. Terrific. So Glen Ellen, North Chicago, Oswego, Yorkville, all departments that have reached out and requested the training, and I've been able to provide that to them, to their officers.
Well, the training is obviously important year-round, but as we mentioned at the top, this is Autism Accpetance Month in April, which is a fundraising opportunity as well. Tell me a little bit about that.
That's correct. So for typically what we've done in the past for Autism Awareness Month is, for the past few years, we had autism awareness magnets on all of our squad cars. So in the month of April, you'll see our squad cars driving around, and we have the autism awareness magnets on our cars. We want the community to understand the disability and support our special needs community. We took it a step further this year, and this year we decided we were going to do shoulder patches for our police department. So this year we had patches, autism awareness patches designed for our officers, and for the month of April, the officers will be able to wear them on their uniforms to support Autism Awareness Month. We also did it as a fundraiser, so we ordered a significant amount of number of the patches, and we were able to sell them, and all the money raised from the proceeds from the patches will be used to fund programs for our special needs community within the police department in the village. So we have some I have some future plans and programming I'd like to do, but so the funding from the fundraising for the patches will be able to fund some of those programs that we're looking for the future down the road to expand our programming.
So what kind of special needs programs and events do you have?
So right now we partner with Chicago Top Soccer. So Chicago Top Soccer is a soccer program here in Addison that is designed for children with a wide range of disabilities, and it's run by Sean Danhauser, who lives here in town. And it's very interesting how Sean and I got connected. Is Sean sent an email to Director Hayden basically expressing his concerns as a parent of a child with special needs. And I responded back to Sean. He's like, I have this special needs soccer program in town. Can you come speak to my parents? I'm like, absolutely. So I came out, spoke to the parents, explained some of the programming. And actually I fell in love with the program. I've been coaching with Sean for 6 years, and both of my sons are players.
Terrific.
Both of my sons are players for Chicago Top Soccer. So the first year I was working with Sean as a coach, we decided we wanted to host a first responders game. So all of our kids in soccer are assigned a buddy to assist with play. So the last game of the season in the spring, we now open that up, and we've had our officers from the Addison Police Department and our firefighters from the Addison Fire Department, and they are our buddies with the kid for that day.
Nice.
So it gives our kids to interact with law enforcement and firefighters in a neutral setting, because soccer is a very comfortable setting for them.
Exactly.
But it also gives our opportunity for our officers and our firefighters to interact with a wide array of disabilities and children. And really, when you see they have these unique characteristics, but ultimately they're still just kids, and to look past the disability a little bit and build that relationship. And we're also building a relationship with those families. And afterwards, we have a huge touch a truck event. So the fire department brings out their fire trucks, we brought our squad cars, we have their officers come out, and we have a big event afterwards. It's been tremendously successful, and we've been doing it, I think we've had it 5 years so far.
Nice.
We've been doing it, and I'm sure we will end up doing it again in the spring as well. And then we've expanded that, and now we've incorporated recruits from the police academy to come out, and I teach a portion of instruction of interacting with people with disabilities. And now we've incorporated to bring out the academy recruits who aren't even police officers just yet. We've incorporated them into the soccer program as well for the same purpose. So some of the things we do, but we, planning, and obviously COVID kind of put a damper on some of the things, but we want to have, for April, we want to do a big meet and greet. We want to have our families come out, interact with the officers, and vice versa. So clearly we weren't able to do it this year because we're restricted on what we can do, but for next year that's a plan. And we're working on another program, but again, COVID put a hamper on that, but it's a program called Growth Through Opportunity Cadets. And what it is, it's a cadet program through the police department, but is geared towards young adults with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And they will work within the police department as almost like an intern. We will provide them with some job-related skills. We'll work with our local community businesses to help with job training. And the goal is for them to seek employment after they're done with the program. So it's a 14-week program, and there's a physical fitness component to it. And we were scheduled to start last year, but again, COVID, we weren't able to do it. So it is in the works for the future, and part of the money raised from the fundraiser of the patches will help start that program, hopefully within the next year or so. So it's a tremendous program. It's been successful really on the East Coast is primarily, but if we do it, we will be the first department in Illinois to host this program. So we will be kind of the trendsetter for the Illinois area. So.
You put in your notes for me to ask about how to get community input. What are you looking for from the community as a whole?
I speak from my experience as a dad with 2 children with autism, but we want to hear what the community has. What resources would you like to see? What training would you like to see? What programming or events would you like to see as a community member to interact with us as a law enforcement agency here in Addison? We want your input. We really do. And if there's issues or concerns, please address them. Come to the department and please bring them to our attention. We will address them and work with the community members. And sometimes we don't, we're in such a large community that we don't always, have the ability to interact with every single individual, but we want the community's input. So if there's programming or resources that you think would be beneficial to help serve your family, please reach out to us and we will look into it. And if we can incorporate it into what we're doing on a daily basis, then we will. But sometimes our community is our best resource. So.
Exactly, and I'm sure the parents need as much of a comfort level as the special needs children do, just in the interaction with the police department.
Absolutely, and we know there's some apprehensiveness for family, for families to contact us because the fear of their disability won't be recognized or their actions will be misinterpreted, and we want to correct that. We want to build that special needs community. So if there are things that the community or families that would like to see us do, then please, address it. And we'd love to hear your input. we ultimately serve the community and we want to hear your input. So we are open. My contact information is on the website. If you go to that crisis intervention page, my email is on there. I do work midnight, so I'm 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So don't be alarmed by a 2 a.m. response, because it's my midday for me. But we want to hear from you. We want to hear from the community and what things you would like us to see us as a department do, incorporate.
And what about if someone wants to participate in the fundraiser, purchase a patch, for instance?
You can reach out to the department through our Facebook page, or again, you can email me. My email address is on our webpage. If you go to that crisis intervention page, my email address is on there. And obviously, we will post them on Facebook, but we're already starting to get some requests from Facebook. And thus far, the response in the patches has been overwhelming. We've sold over 300 patches, and I think I sold the first 200 in 8 days.
Wow.
So the response by our fire department, within our school districts, and within our own agency has been overwhelming. So I have a feeling once our community gets a hold of this, I think our response is going to be even greater. So we may be doing a second order if the response is that.
So be patient. There may be a little bit of a delay if you're trying to purchase a patch.
We sold out in 300 and very quickly. So I kind of underestimated how many we would be able to sell. But if the community is interested, please reach out to us. And then if we have to do additional orders, we will. But again, all the money raised from this will go towards programming to assist with our special needs community here within the department and the village.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for bringing this to ACTV and to the Addison Police Department, Stefan.
I appreciate the time, and I'm glad I was able to reach out to the community. And again, we want to build that relationship and that trust, and that's our biggest thing as an agency. So anything we can do to assist in it, we are on that mission. And as switching gears as a dad, I'm glad to see so many law enforcement agencies now taking the initiative and build these programs and training and utilizing these resources to better serve our special needs community. So I thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. The resources that we've discussed today regarding Autism Accpetance Month are available on the Addison Police Department website. We'll bring that up, but it's addisonpoliceillinois.org. And you can also check out their Facebook page. Please consider purchasing a patch for the fundraising, and more information is available online. I'm Dory Craggy. Thanks for joining us.